On today's show, we are talking about the administration standard and the recently published update. But you know me, that's not deep enough. I go in a little bit deeper than just that. And I bring on somebody who knows way more about the standards than I do. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Stay tuned.
Don't hang up that phone. We've found what you're looking for. Welcome to the Let's Talk Cabling podcast with Chuck Bowser, RCDD. What exactly does RCDD stand for? Registered Communications Distribution Designer. Just the expert you need to ensure your cable plant performs exactly as designed. Now, send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications.
Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, project managers, estimators, customers, anybody interested in the ICT industry. We are connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. If you're watching this show on YouTube, would you mind hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified when new content's being published? If you're listening to this on one of the podcast platforms, would you mind leaving us a 5-star rating? Those couple little tips helps us beat the algorithm so we can get this content, free informational content, out to more people in the ICT industry so we can educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of everybody in the industry. Thursday nights, 6 p.m. After hours, Ask Chuck Bowser, RCDD. It's broadcast on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. But I hear you now, Chuck, Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern, I'm driving my car home. I can't be watching a video. That's okay, they're recorded. You can watch them later on YouTube, or you can go to the webpage at www.letstalkcabling.com and watch all of the recorded podcasts and vlogs and live streams. Also, if you're interested in becoming a supporting member of this platform, it's always going to be free, but it does cost money to run the show. So if you want to become a supporting member, get in touch with me and let me know. So today, I've realized that I talk a lot about code, and that's because I'm a code nerd. All right, I just love talking about the code. I like talking about the standards too, but I realized that I haven't given the standards equal presence on my show. And you know, I bring in my NEC expert all the time. We answer this tough question, but today I've got a standards expert, and not just any expert. This is Jonathan Jew. He sits on the chairs on quite a few ANSI committees. Welcome to the show, Jonathan Jew. How are you doing today?
Thanks a lot, Chuck. Appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And just so the audience knows, this is actually our second time doing this interview because the first time something happened to the audio, life glitches happens. So if you don't mind, could you just give us a 30-second highlight of your career and how you got in this industry and what makes you an expert to be able to sit on the standards?
Okay, I'm an independent consultant that specializes in data centers. In around 2000, I started getting involved in TIA. And at about the time, the tech crash happened. So there were a ton of data center projects that we were working on around the world, and they came to a sudden halt. But at the same time, TIA started working on a data center standard. I had all this information about building data centers, so I got involved in TIA, and I've been in the leadership on a number of TIA subcommittees. I'm currently the secretary of TR42, which is premises cabling. So they develop TIA develops U.S. national and Canadian national cabling standards. They're also used worldwide. I'm the vice chair for TR42.3, which handles pathways and spaces, administration, bonding and grounding. And I've also been chair or vice chair at previous times of TR42.6, which was administration and got merged into TR42.3. And for TR42.1, which develops a number of the premises standards, including the generic standard, the commercial building standard, and the data center standard.
Well, let me just take a second.
Actually, I forgot all the other stuff that I worked on.
I was going to say, just let me take a second just to thank you for all the volunteer work that you do to make this industry better. And I got to ask you, do you have any spare time? Because between your full-time job and your volunteer work, you must be pretty busy.
Yeah, I'm pretty busy, but like you, the standard stuff is a hobby. And then Also involved in Bixby. So for those of you that are involved in getting your RCDD, the administration and data center chapters, I'm the subject matter lead on those. And then for the also for Bixby, I'm the chair of the Bixby Data Center Design Subcommittee, which develops the Bixby 002 standard. And then in ISO IAC, I'm the vice chair of the U.S. Technical Advisory Group that develops the U.S. Input into the international standards.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because if it's something you love doing, it's like my podcast and my vlog, right? This is my second full-time job. When I get off work at 5 o'clock, my day job, I
Mhm.
start working on podcast stuff. It's like having a second full-time job, but I don't view it as a job. I view it as paying it forward to
Right.
the people in the industry. So I take a lot of pride, and I just get a lot of enjoyment out of doing it. So I don't need, it just, I understand what you mean. So while we get started, first I want to talk about I'm going to talk about all the standards, and in a
Okay.
minute I'm going to talk about the administrative standards.
Okay.
But let me ask you this before we talk about those standards: if somebody wants to get involved in contributing or voting on standards, what's the process for that?
Okay. The easiest one to get involved with are the Bixby standards, because you don't need to pay a membership. You just need to attend. And most of the Bixby standards meetings you can uh, uh, attend virtually, remotely. Of course, it's a lot more fun to attend them in person. You get to meet all the people, and then you become friends with them, and that's really fun. And there's a lot of Bixby subcommittees where they're developing data center standards, outside plant standards, educational standards. So there's a lot of work that Bixby's doing. There's a Bixby on the Bixby website. You can get hold of Jeff Severa, who's the director of standards at Bixby, and you just let him know that you're interested in participating, and he can add you to the list. And if you interested in voting on a standard, you can let him know that. And then if you attend enough meetings, you can be a member of quorum in the subcommittee, and then you can start voting. The same for there's a Bixby Codes Committee. If you're interested in actually getting involved, you're a codes person. If you're actually involved, want to get involved in uh, changing the code or making corrections to it, or influencing it in some way, you could attend the Bixby Codes Committee, and Bixby has a person that goes to the codes committees and provides Bixby's input into the codes. So that's another great thing that the standards subcommittee does. And then there's the part of Bixby that develops the manuals, and you can get involved in that too. So if you are interested in updating the manuals or providing input to it, you can do that too. And there's a committee involved in developing the manuals. So all that is for free, and a lot of the meetings you can attend remotely. Now for the TIA ones, you can attend one or two, and um, you can provide your input into the meeting, but you can't actually vote in the meetings until you pay a membership. And there's something called an engineering committee, um, I forget, ECP, engineering committee participant. And for a small company like mine, it's about $1,300, $1,300 a year, which is not bad. I mean, it can be expensive if you're an individual, but if you're a consultant and you're interested in influencing the TIA standards, then that's the way to do it. It gives you access to the standards that you participate in. So it might actually, if you total up all the standards that you buy, it might end up being about the same price anyway, because you'll get copies of the standards that you participate in.
Yeah, I've
Which is
looked at
why
that, and
I
you're right. It's about the same if you buy the standards. And there's a couple things I want to add to that, and feel free to expand on these as well. To participate on the committee meetings, whether the ANSI or the Bixby, you don't have to be an expert about everything and know everything there is. It's a great learning opportunity, because the committees are made up of people with specialized knowledge of certain parts of the industry, and when you bring them all together, that makes the whole thing better. I remember the first time I got involved, and it's been quite a few years. I think it was like 2001, 2002 when I first got involved in my first Bixby committee, and I remember I'm thinking, these guys are going to be engineers and consultants, and they're going to start talking about stuff I don't know. But I was literally a project manager right out of the field, so I was bringing in a field perspective to that, and I brought a lot of perspective. So again, I didn't know everything, so it's a great way to learn stuff. It is. It absolutely is a great way to learn stuff and sharpen you. And then the second point I want to make on that is, yes, it costs money, right? But that's a feather in your cap when you're responding to bids and stuff. When you say, "Oh yeah, well he's not just, some consultant. This guy actually writes standards and codes and stuff." How do you put a value on that, right?
Actually, it sets you way above your peers. So there are a few other consultants that participate, and it puts you on a tier above all the other consultants, because there's a bunch of consultants and there are just other people that read the standard. And then there's a tier of consultants, they're the guys that develop the standards that all the other ones follow. So you're the ones at that top tier. So one, it makes you part of the leadership in your industry. Two, it gives you access to the standards before everybody else gets to see them, and it allows you to influence them. Because to be honest, in TIA, we're looking for more people other than manufacturers to participate in these standards. We need more people that are non-manufacturer participants. So we would encourage you, these people, you who are outside of the manufacturer area, to join us. And you don't have to be expert, as you said. We've had people participate in the data center standard that were mainly electrical people or mechanical people, because they were interested in participating in developing the data center standard. The other thing that allows you to do, other than all the free copies of the standards that you get, which I think ends up being the value of the standards that you get is more than the cost of the membership. But then the setting yourself above your tiers is way more valuable. And then you get access to people who develop the standards. Now your peers are the guys who are the leaders in the industry. You're on first name basis with all the people with the top tier people in the industry.
It's funny you brought that up, because I just got asked a question a couple days ago about a particular subject in the code book, and I responded back with my interpretation. But I was like, when I thought about it, I was like, I really need to reach out to this other person. I don't want to say who it is because they didn't give me permission to use their name, and they confirmed what I said. But they said, "Oh, you also really need to think about this, and this." So you're right; it gives you access to other people, which is another great resource. And you hit that right on the head, man. Right on the head. Hopefully you listening to this show will consider, if nothing else, at least participating in a Bixby committee, because those are free. Those are free. And I've reached out. I got the information to get back engaged back again. I just, because of COVID and my work and training, I just haven't had the time to pull the trigger to actually go there. But I made it a mental commitment. I made it a goal. No, wait a minute. It's not a goal until you write it down. So I'm gonna write it down right now. You're my witness, Jonathan. So
that's right. So write that down there.
Follow up on Bixby committee, because like I said, they reached out to me and I said, yeah, no problem, I'm interested, blah blah blah, and then I just kind of, with work and everything else, boom. So now it's written down. It's a goal.
All right.
So in January, February, feel free to reach out to me and say, Chuck, hold me accountable. So there you go. So let's talk a little bit about the administration standard, right? I know they just got recently, a new version got published, but before we talk about that, what is the driving force that was behind creating the administration standard? Because we know that the administration standard is like the redheaded stepchild of the standards.
Right. The main force behind it was a need to come up with a standard for labeling and documentation of your cabling system, because it's a basic thing that you need to do, and we felt it was really important.
So when you start labeling stuff, because customers generally fall in like one of about four categories, right? They either don't care what you label it, or they want to number it sequentially, or they want them by room numbers. And I think one of the reasons that people shy away from the administration standard, unless you actually take the time and read it, just like you read the code book. You gotta read the code book twice, right? If you take the time and actually read it, you understand it. And if you don't really understand, you don't understand the benefit of using that standard, right? So what is the benefits of using the administration standard?
Well, the big benefits are simpler management. So you can find things more quickly. You can make adds, moves, and changes much more quickly. So for example, my partner and I do plan adds, moves, and changes for some of our customers. And these customers are located all over the world. Because we have such great documentation for those sites, we don't have to have somebody go up there and tell me what port's available on this patch panel, what type of cable is it. We already know where that is. The other thing that we do is that we know where everything is, so we can plan all the patch port lanes beforehand. It's really easy for us to do that. So there's a big savings in labor for us to find things and plan things out. The other thing is availability. Is that because when you have a problem, having good documentation and having good labeling is absolutely key. I had a customer who was a technology company, and they make electronic equipment, and they had a more than 80% decrease in downtime when they started coming up with good labeling and documentation, because they were spending more time trying to find the source of the problem than fixing the problem. So the basic stuff of labeling and documentation are very, very important to reduce downtime.
I'm glad to hear you say that. And the reason I say that is because I was just talking to Todd Morris over at Brother System. I can't remember if it was on his show, he was on my show, or we were just talking. I don't remember I remember we talked about it, I just remember where. And we were talking about labeling and if something's labeled correctly and consistently, and everybody knows how that system's used, then you as a service technician, you're going to be able to bring that voice cable, that data cable back up quicker, right? Now that's going to make your bill cheaper, right? Which is a good thing for a customer. But a lot of technicians don't think about the flip side of that. The person who's supposed to be using that telephone to make cold calls, the person who's supposed to be sending those emails with those documents they can't be doing their work. So the company's actually taking a double hit, right? They can't pay that person for what they're supposed to be doing, and they're paying you, the service technician, to fix this, right? So you're right. I'm really glad to hear you say that. Could you just give us a high-level overview of the difference between the 4 classifications?
Sure. So the first class is just for a premise served by a single equipment room or telecom room. So it has no backbone cabling. And then the second class 2, is for a premise comprised of a single building or the portion of a building. So you would have an equipment room and maybe multiple telecom rooms. The third class 3 is for a single campus. And then class 4 is for a multi-city enterprise.
So in each one of those classifications, it's going to require you to label different things. It kind of like builds up, right?
Right.
And it also talks about, it's not just about labeling everything, it's also about documenting, right? So we can use paper-based systems, spreadsheets, and cable management software. Can you just talk briefly about the benefits of each of those, or the benefits and drawbacks of each of those 3 systems and where they might be used?
Sure, absolutely. So for class 1, you're allowed to use those paper-based systems and a general purpose spreadsheet. And the problem with a paper-based system is that they're much more difficult to update, and you can't search a paper-based system very well. A spreadsheet works really well for a limited size system, but if you have multiple sites and multiple people trying to update it, then a spreadsheet won't work out really well, in which case you should use a cable management software or something like an automated infrastructure management system to support. Anything other than class 1, they specify that you have to use either a general purpose spreadsheet, which is good for a smaller system, or specialized cable management software or an AIM system.
So you can only use paper-based systems, make sure I understand correctly. You can only use a paper-based system for a class 1 install.
That's right.
Okay. And let me add two more things to that class 1, right? Number 1, notebooks get lost, right? And number 2, handwriting, right? So just so you can see, look, it says, see my handwriting?
Right.
Yeah, that's my goal. Get in
You would
touch
make a
with
great
Dixie about the
doctor.
committee. So you see, I actually did write that, right? So I remember a quick little story. I remember when my oldest daughter was in 2nd grade, and once a year you have to go do your parent-teacher conferences. And all year long, she'd been getting gigged because of her band handwriting. And A's everywhere else, handwriting, C or D. So we're sitting there, we're doing the one face-to-face required, and the teacher looks at, gives everything, and then, well, here, you have to sign it when you're done. So I sign it, and I hand it back to her, and she looks at it, and she goes, oh, that's where she gets her handwriting. But true story. True story. Now, before we move on to the next question, I want to ask you something that's always been bugging me, right? Rack units. Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So rack units. There's, one rack unit's 1.75 inches or 45 millimeters for my audience outside of the US. Why is rack unit 1 at the bottom? Why is it not at the top?
Okay. Well, in TI 942, the first version of the standard, we actually didn't use rack units for the patch panels. The system that we came up with was that the patch panels were labeled A, B, C, D, starting from the top. But that started breaking down because if I replaced a 4U panel with two 2U panels, there's one A.1 and one A.2, right? So that didn't really make sense. Then we came up with the idea when we moved the labeling of rack units into the 606 standard of numbering the RUs. And so the question was, do you label one at the top or one at the bottom? And we picked one at the bottom for a few reasons. The first one was, if I have the patch panels hanging above the cabinet. So for example, we have mainframe systems or storage arrays where they have rack units for the internal equipment, but IBM doesn't like you putting a patch panel inside the mainframe. So we'll hang the patch panel above the mainframe attached to the cable tray. So that might be RU number 55. If one were at the top of the mainframe, that might be RU negative something. So we didn't want to have negative RUs. That's one. The second reason why we do that is that RU1 should be at the same place everywhere, because when you're doing your patch cord length calculations, and my partner and I do this all the time when we're trying to plan out patch cord lengths, you can calculate the lengths of the patch cords partly by the difference in RU between the two cabinets. So if RU1 were at one height in one cabinet and at another height because the other cabinet was shorter or taller, then the calculations would not work out. And there actually there was a third one. We found that most cabinets were labeled with RU1 at the bottom anyway, so it just made the whole thing simpler. Now I've seen cabinets with RU1 at the top, but that's less common.
So if you have let's say for example, you have a fiber optic enclosure, right? And it's 4 rack units.
Mm-hmm.
Which number do you use to label it?
Okay, we specify the top in TI 942, but many of my clients pick the bottom, and either is okay if you are consistent throughout your enterprise. So if you use the same RU everywhere, it doesn't really matter too much whether or not you pick the top or the bottom. I originally picked the top one when we wrote the administration standard, because sometimes we would hang a patch panel at the very bottom RU, and the bottom of the patch panel was a little bit below RU1.
As I mentioned, the administration standard is the redheaded stepchild, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's enforced as diligently as other standards, and why or why not?
Okay, yeah, it's not enforced really diligently because a lot of people don't bother reading the standard. So they might just do, as you mentioned, start with the one in every room and really don't have anything more for their identifiers. But if I'm troubleshooting something, I might want to know where cable 1 is, and there's a lot of cable 1s. If the outlet just says cable 1 at my desk, which telecom room do I have to go to? Because I might be between two of them, right? So it doesn't really help. Using a consistent compliant cabling system has two advantages. One is the whole system has been really thought out very carefully to ensure that it's consistent and that it's unique and that identifies all the components well. The other thing that it works really well for is, so I have a new technician come in, or if I have contractors come in, they can come in and they'll understand the standard and they can say, oh, I know exactly where this cable goes because it's a TIA compliant labeling system. So it's people who understand the standard can come in right away and understand where to find something.
There's a lot to be said when you hit one of them right on the head. If you hire a new technician, let's say you're bringing a brand new Bixby technician from another company because you're an open slot. If they know the administration standard, you can put them on the most complex of jobs, and if you follow the standards, they're going to get the speed a lot quicker, which saves you money as a company, as a manager, because you're not spending as much time training that person how to read. I remember there's some systems that some customers make up that this is cable number 39, and if the moon's in a full blood harvest moon on an odd number year, and you need a magic decoder ring to be able to decipher their coding scheme. And that's just one customer. Can you imagine you have 50 customers? If everybody has their own different number, how much of a headache would that be as a manager or as a service technician? So that's actually some good stuff. So the D version just got published, right? It
Mhm.
came out what I think like a month ago, give or take.
Not
Something.
very long ago,
Yeah,
right?
the,
Very,
the
very.
the ink is still wet on the books.
That's right.
Yeah. So what's new in the new version of the administration standard?
In the D version, the primary change was to make the administration of remote powering normative. That means a requirement, because as you recall, and being a code person, that remote powering is an important code issue, particularly recently. So we made the requirements for administering remote powering a requirement. They include things like cable bundle identifiers, because you have to understand which bundles cables are in, and records regarding remote powering on the cables. And we've made all these records and the reporting compliant with the new automated infrastructure management system addendum, which was an addendum on remote powering, adding remote powering to the host specifications for how you do administration of remote powering on AIM systems.
Very cool. I do have one more question about the administration step before we move off, right?
Mhm.
So for class one, I'm looking at my reference material. I don't, it's funny. I'm really thinking about maybe spending the $1,300 to participate in the ANSI membership, ANSI committees. How long does it take you to get your first free standard? Do you have to wait till they're published, or you get
You
access to
have
them right away?
to, at if you get free copies of any standards that you vote on. So if you're voting on any standard and the standard comes out next week, then you get a copy of it. So it's, on the other hand, if you're in a dry spell where we just started to work on a whole bunch of new standards. So you might have to wait until we're done publishing them before they come out.
So in the class one, you got to label the telecom space, the horizontal link, the primary bonding bus bar, and the secondary bonding bus bar. So
Mhm.
for class one, that's a single building. I mean, a single building or tenant with a small telecom space, right?
Mhm.
Where would there be a secondary bonding bus bar in that environment?
You could have a secondary bundling bus bar in a larger room with you. So you primary bundling bus bar in a telecommunications bonding system is required, but you might have a second one because the room is larger. For example, for like if I had a computer room in there, in a computer room, I often will have what's called a mesh bonding network. But if I don't have a mesh bonding network and I don't want to have long bonding conductors, I might have two bonding bus bars in that room.
Gotcha.
Right.
That makes sense, especially if you got like a large data center or something like that, where you might have a second. Yeah, that actually makes sense now. Because I was thinking, wait a minute, if that's a small building, why do we have two bus bars? But again, it just goes to show you how in depth you guys have actually thought about the standards. Let me ask you this: is there any discussion in the administration standard about maybe using QR codes or maybe barcodes or something?
You're allowed to use these other things, but you still have to have the person readable labels. And the reason for that is that you don't want to be reliant on your computer network to troubleshoot the labeling system if the computer network is down.
Oh, yeah. If it goes down, you can't read it, can you?
That's right.
Ah, you guys, I'm telling you, think of everything. You think of everything. Because I'm thinking, instead of just putting a 45 and putting that on the battery, why not just do a QR code and just that makes perfect sense. If the network's down, you don't have access to that information.
That's right.
You don't have access to information. So now I know that you're not just working on the administration standards. You mentioned at the very beginning of the show, you're involved in a lot of standards. What's new with all the other standards that you have working knowledge of?
Okay, cool. Well, in committees, including the ones that I work on, some of the more exciting ones are TR 42.11, the optical fiber systems. They're on industry ballot on an update to 568.3. And that's the optical fiber cabling standard that we all use in TIA. And they've grandfathered OS1, which is the indoor optical fiber cable with the water peak. So it's considered obsolete. It's been
OS1
replaced.
is considered OS1's considered obsolete?
because it's been replaced with something called OS1A.
OS1A. Okay.
That's one way.
And what's
Right.
what's the difference between OS1 and OS1A?
OS1A is the indoor tight buffered optical fiber cable that doesn't have the water peak. Okay, so
So they're
um,
both zero water peak. Just the OS1 is indoor rated. And I'm assuming because you said that the OS2 would be outdoor rated.
no. Yeah, OS1 is the one that has the water peak. So it's the older cable that has higher attenuation.
Gotcha.
Right. So the where the water peaks appear. So that's been grandfathered, and the ones with the very low water peak or no water peak are OS1A for the indoor one and OS2 for the outdoor one.
Yeah, I meant perfect example. My brain thinking one thing and my mouth saying something totally different. I was thinking O1A, but when you start explaining, it's like I said O1A. That's thinking, did I say O1A or did I say
That's
OS1?
okay.
That's my ADHD kicking in on me right there, right?
Right.
So what else is going on all the other standards that you worked on?
Okay, great. That's great. And there's and for single mode, there's also an indoor-outdoor cable that doesn't have an OS designation. We've grandfathered OM1 and OM2, so OM3 or higher are the required multi-mode optical fiber cables. The cool thing in 568.3-E is a new breakout between an MPO and an LC. So the new breakout, the connectivity methods for MPO to duplex connectivities have two new types, a U1 and a U2. And the really cool one is the U2 one, because I can use the same cassette that I use for structured cabling to break out an MPO to 6 duplex LCs or 12 simplex LCs for breaking out a QSFP to an SFP. So for 40 to 10 gig or 100 to 425s or 200 to 450s, or shortly in June 2022, 400 to 4100s in duplex. So that's same cassette for both uses, and it's really, really cool.
Now you said a term. I'm going to take a half step back, and I want to make sure I clarify this term.
Mhm.
Grandfathered.
Right.
What does that mean?
That means in older installations, you still have them, and there's still specifications for them. But if you have a new installation, you need to be installing the newer cable types. Okay, I was going to say that we have new cable types that we're adding, but I'll let you add.
Gotcha. So is there a difference between grandfathered and legacy?
I don't know that we have the term legacy in our standard, so we call them grandfathered.
Okay.
That we have specifications for them usually in the back of the standard, but they're not recognized for new installations.
Gotcha. So if something's grandfathered, you can use it on any existing installation, but new installations, you should not be using it.
Yeah, if I have a new building, I ought not to be
Gotcha.
using
So
OM1
why did they
and
make
OM2.
why did they make OM1 and OM2 legacy or grandfathered?
Because they don't have the bandwidth that you need for the newer applications. And if you look at all the new applications, that IEEE are coming up with, the new faster standards, they don't even have specifications for lengths for OM1 and OM2. They only have OM3, OM4, and OM5. So why install a new cable that IEEE has no specifications for the new speeds that they're working on?
Right.
Yeah.
So generally those would be for building like backbone cabling, stuff like that. What about if it's a camera out in the parking lot?
Well, if it's an old camera, you can put in the old cable, but I would not encourage it, because you might replace it with a new camera that has higher speeds and more capability. So why install the old stuff when you can install the new stuff? And
yeah. When you look at our industry, I've said this many times. I wish I was just beginning my career right now, as opposed to be ending my career right now, because there's so much exciting stuff coming out right now. And you're right, you hit the nail on the head, especially with video surveillance and access control, stuff's building automation stuff and single pair Ethernet. There's a lot of that stuff. It's amazing. It's amazing. Standards for building automation and single pair Ethernet, or is there any movement there?
Yeah, actually, that's the next thing. So single pair Ethernet, as you mentioned, is going to be a big thing because for eventually people are saying there's going to be more devices. IoT will be a big thing, and there will be more things on the internet than people or computers, like the desktops or servers on the internet. So it's going to be a big thing, and single pair is going to be a big way of handling that because if you're going to power a device, which you need wires for, you might as well put signals over the same one. Now, I suppose you could have wireless devices too, but then you need batteries. And if I have a high-rise building with everything running on wireless, you're going to have a full-time staff of people going around changing batteries, right? So you might as well have wires to power the thing. And then wired signals are more secure than wireless signals. And then, as you probably know, I have a lot of devices in my home. They're smart devices, but occasionally I need to power reset the devices. I have these smart assistant devices, here, and I don't know why, but occasionally I just have to pull the power and then replug them in for them to start working again. I can't do that, with a non-wired device.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I've got a couple AEM testers. I got the cable certified. And I got one that also does the network stuff, and I plugged the network one into my cable router modem, and I was expecting to see my computer. I was expecting to see my work computer. I was expecting to see my wife's computer. I totally forgot about all the other things in my house that are logged onto my network. There was like 15 devices. At first, I was like, somebody's hacking into my network, and then I was like, no, wait a minute, that's my Alexa, that's my thermostat, and there's so much you don't even think about the things that are logging onto your network now.
It's an amazing amount. So the standard for single pair 568.5, the standard for non-industrial single pair will have two new categories of single pair cable: SP1-400, which is 400 meters of single pair cable and up to 5 connections. And then there's SP1-1000, category SP1-1000 cable. It has up to 1,000 meters of single pair cable and up to 10 connections. So you can install that single pair cable in 10 segments. So you don't have to buy a kilometer long reel of single pair cable. You could buy 10 100 meters
Right,
single pair
right.
cable.
That's pretty
Right.
slick. Like I said,
Yeah.
that's what I said earlier. I wish I was at the beginning of my career instead of the end of my career. I'm envious of everybody who's just getting in this industry right now.
Yeah. That's it's a lot of cool stuff. And that's standards and default ballot, which means that will likely publish in January 2022. And
Gotcha.
there's two standards: the intelligent building standard TI 862, which will add single pair, and the generic standard 568.0, both of which are adding single pair, but we're waiting for the single pair standard to come out because we can't publish a standard that references a standard that's not published yet, right? And then
That's always the challenge, right, of writing the standard, especially when
mhm,
because think about this, right? You got the ANSI publishing standards, and then you got the Big C publishing their best practices manuals, the TDMM, the
right,
ITSM, and all the other stuff. That is a challenge to keep those two synchronized, because and
yeah,
it causes a lot of conflict within the industry because some people say, "Well, the TDMM says, well, it hasn't been revised yet."
correct,
You know,
correct,
it
yeah.
causes a
And that's
lot, a
why
lot of
in
problems.
Yes, in the TIA standards, that's why we stop referencing version numbers or dates on the standard. So it's assumed that you're referencing the current version unless there's that particular version has some information that's required, in which case then we'll reference that version number. And then there's an industrial single pair standard that's being developed with all kinds of additional types of single pair cable. On the premises standard CR 42.1, I'm working on the edge data center standard, just data centers which are in little enclosures. And then where we've started work on 4 other standards: healthcare, on revision to the 1179, the healthcare standard, revision to 5017, physical network security, a revision to 4966, which is the educational standard. And then there's revision to 758, the outside plant standard. And then in ISO IEC and the international standards for your listeners, they're outside the US. There's an addendum to 11801-1 on single pair, and an addendum to 11801-6, the intelligent building equivalent on single pair. And then we're also working there on an update to network infrastructure security, the physical security standard, and we'll be starting work on a revision to the bonding standard. And then, of course, in BICSI that you and I are both involved in, revising the building information modeling standard, things like 3D modeling, revising BICSI 004, the healthcare standard. They're starting a new standard on airports and transportation facilities. And they're doing all kinds of work on outside plant standards for installation and design. So all these committees are really, really busy.
And there's a lot of room for people to get plugged in. Hint, audience, hint,
That's right.
hint. Lots of places for you to get plugged in. I'm glad you mentioned ISO. I got two very specific questions to ISO.
Sure.
Right. The first one is, why is there a Cat 7, Cat 7A in the ISO standards, but not in the ANSI standards?
Right. Yeah. Category 7 and 7A are great cables, and they're very popular in Europe and in some other locations in the world, but they're not as popular in the US. And for a project to start off, you have to have enough people to authorize the ballot, to authorize the new project. And every time the subject to authorize the new project for category 7, 7A has come up, there wasn't enough interest in the TR 42.7, our Copper Cabling Systems Committee, to start that work. So maybe that's because we don't have enough people using shielded cabling systems, even though it's a great cable. And it might be just that these people who voted against it feel that, well, we have category 6 and 6A cable that have 1 gig and 10 gig. And now we have category 8, that's a shielded cable that handles 25 to 40 gigs. So we really don't have a place for 7 right now. And if you want to use a shielded cable, you'll just use it as a shielded category 6 or 6A cable. And that's fine.
Right. Exactly. It's funny because I often think of, when I think about the Cat 7, Cat 7A, I think of the old Cat 4 days.
Yeah.
Right? Cat 4 was around for literally 2 weeks. I mean, then it was gone. I've done one project that was Cat 4. My other question about the ISO 11801 is there, I don't remember if I read this or if I heard somebody mention this. It might have even been on the internet. If it's on the internet, we both know that's true, right? If it's on the internet, right? Right?
Has to be.
Exactly. Is there any talk or interest in combining the ANSI and the ISO and just only having one standard for the Earth, and not instead of having two separate standards?
No. Actually, if anything, the ISO standards and the CENELEC standards, some of them are developed in parallel. And that's partly because the votes in the international standards committees are by country. So, and there are, in terms of the number of people attending and voting on the standards, we tend to have a higher participation from the European countries than from North America and Asia. So North America would consist of Canada, the US, and Mexico, but just Scandinavia, which has Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, could outvote the whole North America, right? So, and then there's a lot of other countries in Europe. So our ISO IC standards tend to look a lot more like the CENELEC, the European standards, and the development of those standards is much closer. So I doubt that there will be a merger of ISO IC and ANSI standards. We actually consider it a victory when we have a major influence, where the ANSI standards have a major influence on the ISO IC standards.
No, that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. Any other interesting news in the standards area?
No, we're working on a lot of stuff. I know that we have all kinds of cool things going on. I would encourage in TIA in particular, because we have a few consultants in there, we have a few users, but we really need many more people from the user, consultant, designer side of the community. And we're in every meeting we have this mention that we're looking for more participants from outside the manufacturer side, because it's good for us and it's good for the standards when that happens.
Yeah, you get a more rounded view, right?
Yeah,
because I've heard this from many students in many classes. If you fill up a committee with nothing but manufacturers, they're just going to be pushing to put their products in the standards.
Yeah,
that's why you need end users. That's why you need, contractors. When I used to work for a really large cabling contractor, I won't say who it was because I don't have permission to use their name. They were actually an ANSI voting member. I don't know if they still are or not, and I used to vote on some of the ANSI stuff when I used to work for them. So, but it brings a more rounded view and a better end product when you finish.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, my head's about ready to burst with all this new knowledge you gave me.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you again. Thank you for all your volunteer work. And hopefully we can bring you back on the show in the future if we get standard questions, or if there's a standard update that you want to talk or whatever, feel free to reach out. We would love to have you as a regular guest on the show.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate you. Until next time, everybody, remember, knowledge is power.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.